They said I slept my way to the top. My own family. At Thanksgiving dinner, in front of everyone, my Aunt Linda looked me dead in the eye and said, "Well, honey, we all know how young girls really get ahead these days." The table went silent. 23 pairs of eyes staring at me like I was some kind of scandal they'd been whispering about behind closed doors. I was 25 years old, the youngest regional manager in TechFlow Solutions history, and the people who were supposed to celebrate my success were convinced I'd earned it on my back instead of my brain.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Trista McDaniels had always been different from the rest of her family. While her cousins spent their weekends at house parties and shopping malls, she was hunched over her laptop in the corner of whatever family gathering was happening, teaching herself coding languages and building mock websites for imaginary companies. The McDaniels clan was large, loud, and largely blue-collar. Her father, Mike, worked construction. Her mother, Janet, managed a small diner, and most of her extended family followed similar paths. They were good people, honest people, but they lived in a world where success came through decades of grinding, not through 20-something ambition. Growing up in Cedar Falls, Michigan, Trista was the family oddball. She graduated valedictorian from Cedar Falls High, while her older brother Danny barely scraped by with C's before joining their dad's construction crew. Her younger sister Emma was the social butterfly, crowned homecoming queen, and already engaged to her high school sweetheart at 22. Trista was the bookworm, the one who asked for programming courses for Christmas instead of jewelry, the one who spent her summer job money on online certifications instead of clothes. "You know what your problem is, Trista?" her grandmother Dolores had said during one family barbecue when Trista was 19. "You think you're better than us. All this computer nonsense, what happens when you realize the real world doesn't work like your little screen?" But Trista never thought she was better than anyone. She just knew she was different, and she'd learned early that different wasn't always welcomed with open arms in the McDaniels family. They loved her, sure, but they loved her the way you love a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit, with a mixture of affection and frustration. After graduating from Michigan State with a degree in information systems, Trista landed an entry-level position at TechFlow Solutions, a mid-sized software company based in Grand Rapids. It was a 40-minute commute from Cedar Falls, but it felt like traveling to another planet. TechFlow specialized in creating custom software solutions for manufacturing companies, and Trista was hired as a junior systems analyst. The work was exactly what she dreamed of: complex problem-solving, innovative thinking, and the opportunity to build something meaningful from lines of code. Her supervisor was Marcus Chen, a brilliant 34-year-old who'd built TechFlow's entire client management system from scratch. Marcus was nothing like the men in Trista's family. He was soft-spoken where they were loud, thoughtful where they were impulsive, and he valued ideas over volume. Under his mentorship, Trista flourished. She arrived early, stayed late, and absorbed everything she could about the business. Within 6 months, she was leading client presentations. Within a year, she developed a streamlined onboarding process that reduced new client setup time by 40%. Marcus began including her in management meetings, asking for her input on strategic decisions, and assigning her increasingly complex projects. But success in the corporate world came with complications Trista hadn't anticipated. When she attended her cousin Sarah's wedding after her first year at TechFlow, she found herself struggling to explain her work to relatives who measured career progress by hourly wages and overtime pay. "So, you just sit at a computer all day?" her Uncle Robert had asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "I design software systems that help companies manage their inventory and streamline their operations," Trista had replied, immediately realizing how pretentious it sounded to people who worked with their hands. "Uh-huh," Robert had nodded. "And they pay you good money for that?" When Trista mentioned her salary, which was modest by tech standards, but generous compared to most jobs in Cedar Falls, the family's attitude began to shift. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know how she'd managed to land such a cushy job so quickly.
The questions weren't entirely innocent anymore. Her success became a frequent topic of family conversation, usually when she wasn't around to defend herself. Through Emma, she learned about the whispered theories. Maybe she had exaggerated her qualifications on her resume. Maybe the company had diversity quotas to fill. Maybe she just got lucky. The idea that she might have earned her position through merit alone seemed increasingly unlikely to people who'd watched her grow up as the quiet, awkward kid with her nose always in a book. The whispers intensified after Trista's second year at TechFlow, when Marcus recommended her for a senior analyst position. The promotion came with a significant pay raise and her own small team to manage. At 24, she was earning more than her father, who'd been working construction for 30 years. That Christmas dinner was the first time someone, her cousin Jake, made a joke about her working her way up that carried a nasty undertone.
Must be nice having such a supportive boss, Jake had said with a smirk, and several family members had laughed in a way that made Trista's stomach clench. She tried to brush it off. Family dynamics were complicated, and she understood that her rapid success was hard for some relatives to process. But the comments became more frequent and less subtle. Her Aunt Linda started asking pointed questions about Marcus. Was he married? Did he have a family? How often did they work late together? The implication was clear, even when the words remained carefully vague. Meanwhile, at TechFlow, Trista was hitting every milestone Marcus set for her. She'd successfully managed 3 major client implementations, her team consistently exceeded their quarterly targets, and she'd developed a reputation throughout the company as someone who could solve problems others couldn't. The CEO, Patricia Walsh, had started mentioning Trista in company-wide meetings as an example of TechFlow's rising talent. But at home, her success story was being rewritten into something much more sinister. Emma, who still lived in their childhood bedroom and worked part-time at their mother's diner, began making cutting remarks about Trista's work clothes. Must be nice having a boss who notices when you dress up, and her long hours. I bet Marcus really appreciates your dedication. The most painful part was watching her parents navigate the family pressure. Mike and Janet McDaniels were proud of their daughter, but they were also deeply embedded in a community where rumors could spread like wildfire. Janet started asking careful questions about Trista's work environment, clearly fishing for reassurance that nothing inappropriate was happening. Mike grew uncomfortable whenever relatives brought up Trista's career, quickly changing the subject or making excuses to leave the room. "Honey," her mother had said one evening when Trista came home for Sunday dinner, "you know people are going to talk when a young woman moves up so fast in a man's world. Maybe you should, I don't know, be extra careful about appearances?" The suggestion that Trista should dim her professional light to appease family gossip was devastating. She'd worked 80-hour weeks, earned multiple certifications, and consistently delivered results that impressed clients and colleagues alike. But none of that seemed to matter when measured against the comfortable narrative that success for young women must come through bedroom politics rather than boardroom brilliance. By the time TechFlow announced they were expanding into 3 new regions and looking for management candidates, Trista had learned to keep her professional victories to herself when she came home to Cedar Falls. She'd stopped mentioning Marcus's name at family gatherings, downplayed her achievements, and tried to make herself smaller to fit into the box her family had built for her. But she couldn't make herself small enough to avoid what was coming next. Because Patricia Walsh had been watching Trista's work for months, and she'd decided that TechFlow's youngest rising star was ready for the biggest challenge of her career, a challenge that would either prove Trista belonged in the executive suite or confirm every ugly suspicion her family had been whispering in the shadows. The call that would change everything came on a Tuesday morning in March, when Trista was 25 years old and had no idea that her family's whispers were about to become a roar that would test everything she believed about herself, her worth, and what it really meant to succeed on her own terms. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
The call came at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other. Trista was reviewing quarterly performance metrics when her desk phone rang with the distinctive tone that meant someone from the executive floor was calling. Patricia Walsh's assistant, Rebecca, had a voice that could make a dental appointment sound like an invitation to the Met Gala. Ms. McDaniels, Ms. Walsh would like to see you in the executive conference room at 10:30. Please bring your portfolio and any strategic recommendations you've been working on. Trista's stomach dropped. In her 3 years at TechFlow, she'd been to the executive floor exactly twice. Once for new employee orientation, and once to fix Patricia's computer when the IT department was swamped. Senior analysts didn't get summoned to executive conference rooms for casual chats. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt like ascending to another dimension. The executive level was all glass walls, original artwork, and that particular hush that comes with serious money and serious decisions. Patricia Walsh's corner office overlooked Grand Rapids' downtown district, and through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Trista could see construction cranes building the city's future skyline. Patricia was not what people expected from a tech CEO. At 52, she had silver hair she wore in a practical bob, favored blazers in bold colors, and had a laugh that could fill a room. She'd built TechFlow from a 2-person startup in her garage to a company with over 300 employees and clients in 12 states. Industry magazines called her a visionary. Her employees called her demanding but fair. "Trista, sit down," Patricia said, gesturing to the chair across from her massive desk. "I've been watching your work for the past 18 months, and I'm impressed. Your client retention rate is 94%, your team consistently exceeds targets, and you've implemented process improvements that have saved us nearly $200,000 annually." Trista felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Thank you, Ms. Walsh. I love what I do here." "That's obvious, which is why I'm about to offer you something that's going to change your career trajectory completely." Patricia leaned forward, her expression shifting from warm to intensely focused. "We're expanding into 3 new regions: Ohio, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Each region needs a regional manager who can build client relationships, manage multiple teams, and essentially function as the face of TechFlow in their territory." Trista's heart started racing. Regional manager positions were typically reserved for executives with 10 to 15 years of experience. She'd assumed those roles would go to internal candidates from the senior management team. The position comes with significant challenges. You'd be managing teams of 15 to 20 people, overseeing budgets in the mid-7 figures, and traveling extensively. You'd report directly to me and represent TechFlow at industry conferences and client negotiations. The salary is $130,000 annually, plus performance bonuses that could add another $40,000 to $50,000. The number hit Trista like a physical blow. $130,000 was more money than anyone in her family had ever earned in a single year. It was more than her parents' combined income. "I know what you're thinking," Patricia said with a slight smile. "You're 25, you've been here 3 years, and this seems impossibly fast. But here's what I've learned in 20 years of building businesses. Talent doesn't wait for age, and opportunity doesn't follow timelines. You have something most people twice your age don't have: the ability to see solutions where others see problems." Trista found her voice. "Which region would I be managing?" "That's the best part. You get to choose. Ohio is our biggest opportunity, with potential clients in Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. Indiana is more challenging but has less competition. Wisconsin is the wild card. Smaller market, but we've identified several manufacturing companies that are perfect fits for our services." "When would this start?" "June 1st. That gives you 6 weeks to transition your current responsibilities and prepare for the move. Because, yes, you'd need to relocate to whichever region you choose. TechFlow will cover all moving expenses and provide a housing allowance for your first year." The reality of what Patricia was offering began to sink in. This wasn't just a promotion, it was a complete transformation of her life. She'd be leaving Michigan, leaving her family, and stepping into a role that would make her one of the youngest regional managers in the tech industry. "I don't need an answer today," Patricia said with a slight smile, "but I do need one by Friday. This is a big decision, and I want you to think carefully about whether you're ready for this level of responsibility." As Trista walked back to her desk in a daze, her mind was spinning with possibilities and fears. The excitement was intoxicating. Finally, a chance to prove herself at the highest level, to build something significant from the ground up. But underneath the excitement was a growing knot of anxiety about how her family would react.
She spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work while her brain processed the magnitude of what she'd been offered. By the time she drove home to Cedar Falls that evening, she'd made a decision about the first person she wanted to tell. Marcus was still at his desk when she knocked on his office door at 6:30. "Trista, everything okay? You look like you'd seen a ghost after your meeting with Patricia." She closed the door behind her and sat down. "She offered me the regional manager position for the expansion." Marcus's face broke into a genuine smile. "That's incredible! Congratulations! Which region?" "I get to choose." "Marcus, the salary is $130,000 base." He whistled low. "That's serious money. And serious responsibility. How are you feeling about it?" "Terrified and excited in equal measure. I keep thinking there has to be a catch, or I'm not really qualified, or—" "Stop," Marcus interrupted gently. "I recommended you for this position 3 months ago when Patricia first mentioned the expansion. You've earned every bit of this opportunity." Trista felt tears prick her eyes. "You recommended me?" "Of course I did. Trista, in my 10 years here, I've never seen anyone adapt as quickly as you have or deliver results as consistently. Patricia didn't offer you this position because she's feeling generous. She offered it because you're the best candidate for the job." That validation for Marcus meant everything, but it also highlighted the conversation she was dreading. She knew exactly how her family would interpret his recommendation, not as professional recognition, but as confirmation of their worst suspicions. The drive home gave her 40 minutes to practice different ways of sharing the news. Should she lead with the salary, the responsibility, the fact that Patricia had been watching her work for months? Every approach felt inadequate to combat the narrative she knew her family would construct. She found her parents in the kitchen, her father reading the newspaper while her mother prepared dinner. It was such a normal scene, the kind of domestic tranquility she'd grown up taking for granted. In a few minutes, she was about to disrupt that tranquility with news that would fundamentally change how her family saw her. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something. I got offered a promotion today." Janet looked up from the stove, immediately alert. "What kind of promotion?" "Regional manager for TechFlow's expansion into new markets." Marcus folded his newspaper. "That sounds important. What would you be doing?" Trista explained the role, watching her parents' expressions shift from curiosity to concern as the scope of the position became clear. When she mentioned the salary, her mother actually gasped. "Honey, that's a lot of money," Janet said carefully. "Are you sure you're ready for something that big?" "I think so. I mean, I'm nervous, but Patricia, my CEO, said she's been watching my work for months. She thinks I can handle it." The moment she mentioned Patricia's personal attention, she saw something flicker across her father's face. It was subtle, but unmistakable. A shadow of doubt. "Your CEO has been watching you specifically?" Mike asked. "Well, yes, she tracks all of the senior staff performance metrics, but—" "And your boss recommended you for this position?" Janet interrupted. Trista felt the familiar sinking sensation. "Marcus recommended me because of my work performance. I've exceeded every target they've set, and I've implemented cost-saving measures that—" "Of course he did," Mike muttered, not quite under his breath. The 3 words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Trista stared at her father, the man who taught her to ride a bike and helped with her math homework, and saw doubt where there should have been pride. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked quietly. Mike shifted uncomfortably. "Nothing, sweetheart. It just seems very fast, that's all." But Trista heard what he didn't say. She heard the same skepticism that had been growing in whispered family conversations for months, the same doubt that questioned whether her success was really her own. In that moment, sitting in her childhood kitchen with her parents looking at her like a stranger, Trista realized that accepting Patricia's offer wasn't just about advancing her career. It was about proving,
to her family and to herself that she deserved every opportunity she'd been given. The call to change wasn't just professional anymore. It was personal and deeply painful and absolutely necessary.
Friday afternoon arrived with the weight of a deadline. Trista sat in her car outside TechFlow's headquarters, staring at the building where she'd spent 3 transformative years of her life. In her briefcase was a folder containing research on all 3 regions Patricia had offered, detailed market analyses, competitor assessments, and projected growth charts she'd compiled during sleepless nights of preparation. The past 3 days had been a masterclass in family politics. Word of her promotion offer had spread through the McDaniels clan with the efficiency of a telephone tree, and Trista's phone had been buzzing constantly with calls from relatives who'd suddenly developed deep interest in her career trajectory. Her cousin Jake had been the most direct. "So let me get this straight. You're 25, you've been there 3 years, and now they want to make you a regional manager? Trista, come on, we weren't born yesterday." Her Aunt Linda had taken a different approach, calling under the guise of concern. "Honey, I just want to make sure you're being smart about this. These corporate men, they promise young girls the world, but there's always strings attached. What happens when your looks fade or he gets tired of you?" The most devastating conversation had been with Emma, who'd cornered her in their childhood bedroom Thursday night. "You know what the worst part is?" Emma had said, sitting on the twin bed they'd once shared during sleepovers. "I actually defended you. When everyone started talking after Christmas, I told them they were being ridiculous. I said my sister was brilliant and hardworking and they should be proud. But now? $130,000, Trista, for someone who's been out of college for 3 years? Emma, you know what I've accomplished there. You've seen me working. I've seen you working late with your male boss, taking trips with him, getting promoted faster than anyone in the company's history. And now the CEO is personally invested in your career?" Emma's voice had cracked. "I'm supposed to be the pretty one, remember? You were supposed to be the smart one, but smart girls don't get ahead this fast unless they're using more than their brains." That conversation had haunted Trista through a sleepless night. Emma's words hurt because they revealed the family's fundamental belief. Exceptional success for a young woman was inherently suspicious, and Trista's achievements were too extraordinary to be legitimate. Now, sitting in Patricia's office for the second time that week, Trista felt the weight of every whispered conversation, every doubtful look, every implication that her success was unearned. "Have you made your decision?" Patricia asked, settling behind her desk with a cup of coffee. "Yes, I want the Ohio region." "Excellent choice. It's the most challenging territory, but also the one with the highest growth potential. What made you choose Ohio?" Trista opened her folder, revealing pages of meticulously organized research. Columbus has 3 major manufacturing companies that have never used integrated software solutions. Cleveland's industrial sector is experiencing a renaissance, and they're actively seeking modernization partners. Cincinnati has a cluster of mid-sized companies that are perfect fits for our service model. The competition is established, but they're complacent. I think we can offer something fresher and more responsive. Patricia leaned forward, impressed. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking I was hoping for. When can you start?" "June 1st, as you suggested. I've already begun transitioning my current projects to other team members, and I've identified the key skills I need to develop before I relocate, such as advanced negotiation techniques, regional budget management, and industry-specific software applications I haven't worked with yet. I've enrolled in 2 online courses that start next week, and I've reached out to 3 of our existing clients in Ohio to schedule informational interviews about their market." Patricia was quiet for a moment, studying Trista with the intensity that had made her one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Michigan. "You know, when I started this company, I was 32, and people told me I was too young, too inexperienced, too optimistic. The difference was I didn't have to deal with the additional skepticism that comes with being a young woman in a male-dominated industry." Trista felt her throat tighten. "I can handle whatever comes with the territory." "I'm sure you can, but I want you to understand something. This promotion is going to generate talk, inside the company and outside it. People are going to question whether you're qualified, whether you earned it, whether there were other factors involved in the decision. The echo of her family's whispers was so loud, Trista wondered if the Trisha could hear them too. How do you recommend I handle that? By being undeniably excellent at your job, by delivering results that make the doubters look foolish, and by remembering that their skepticism says more about their limitations than yours. Patricia stood up and extended her hand. Welcome to the executive team, Regional Manager McDaniels.
The handshake felt like crossing a bridge that would burn behind her. There was no going back to being the quiet analyst who kept her head down and her ambitions modest. She was committing to a level of visibility and responsibility that would either vindicate her completely or confirm every ugly suspicion her family harbored. That evening, Trista drove to Cedar Falls for what she knew would be a pivotal family dinner. Her parents had invited Danny, Emma, and her grandparents, ostensibly to celebrate her promotion, but Trista suspected it was more like a tribunal disguised as a party. The McDaniels house felt smaller than usual, crowded with relatives who'd gathered to discuss the elephant in the room. Dinner conversation was strained, revolving around safe topics like the weather and local sports, while everyone avoided mentioning the obvious reason for the gathering. Finally, over dessert, her grandfather Harold broke the silence. So, Trista, tell us about this new job of yours. She'd practiced this moment, but facing 5 sets of expectant eyes made her prepared words feel inadequate. I'll be managing TechFlow's expansion into Ohio, building client relationships, overseeing multiple teams, representing the company at industry events. And the salary? Her grandmother Dolores asked bluntly. It's competitive for the role. Don't be coy, dear. We heard it's more than your father makes. Trista glanced at Mike, who was studying his plate intently. The compensation reflects the responsibility level. Danny leaned back in his chair. You know what I don't understand? I've been working construction for 7 years, and I'm still making $17 an hour. You've been at this computer company for 3 years, and now you're making executive money. What exactly did you do to deserve that kind of jump? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was just beginning to spread. Trista felt every technique she'd learned from managing difficult conversations desert her. I exceeded every performance metric they set. I developed cost-saving processes. I maintained a 94% client retention rate. Under the guidance of your male supervisor, Dolores interrupted, who recommended you for this promotion. Marcus recommended me because of my work quality. I'm sure he did, Emma said quietly. The 2 words carried the weight of months of family speculation. Trista looked around the table at people who'd known her since birth, who'd watched her graduate valedictorian, who'd seen her dedication and intelligence firsthand, and realized that none of that mattered when measured against their comfortable assumptions about how young women really succeeded in corporate America. You don't believe I earned this, she said, not a question, but a statement. The silence was deafening. Finally, her mother spoke. Honey, we just want to make sure you're being smart. These situations can get complicated, and if things go wrong, things won't go wrong because I'm qualified for this position. No one's saying you're not smart, Harold said carefully, but business is about relationships, and sometimes those relationships can be misunderstood. Trista stood up from the table, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I'm moving to Columbus in 6 weeks. I'm taking the job, and I'm going to prove that everything I've achieved has been earned through my own merit. As she gathered her purse and jacket, her father finally looked up. Trista, we're just trying to protect you. From what? Success? Opportunity? The chance to build something meaningful with my career? From making a mistake that could follow you for the rest of your life, Janet said softly. Trista paused at the doorway, looking back at her family, people she loved deeply, but who couldn't see her clearly through the lens of their own limitations and fears. The only mistake would be listening to you instead of believing in myself. The drive back to her apartment was a blur of tears and determination. By the time she reached her door, something fundamental had shifted inside her.
She was no longer just accepting a promotion. She was accepting the challenge to prove that young women could succeed on their own terms, despite the doubts of everyone around them. The threshold had been crossed. There was only moving forward now.
Columbus, Ohio in June felt like stepping into an alternate universe. The skyline was bigger than Grand Rapids, the pace was faster, and Trista's new apartment in the Short North District was a far cry from her childhood bedroom in Cedar Falls. The one-bedroom loft had exposed brick walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, and rent that cost more per month than her parents' mortgage payment. But it was hers, and for the first time in her life, she was living somewhere that reflected her professional success rather than apologizing for it. TechFlow's Ohio office occupied 3 floors of a sleek downtown building, and Trista's corner office on the 12th floor came with a view of the Scioto River and the responsibility of building something from virtually nothing. Her team consisted of 12 people, a mix of experienced sales professionals poached from competitors and recent graduates eager to prove themselves. The oldest member, David Kowalski, was 43 and had 20 years of experience in enterprise software sales. The youngest, Ashley Chen, was 22 and had graduated from Ohio State just 3 months earlier. Leading people who were significantly older or more experienced than herself was Trista's first major test, and David made it clear from day one that he wasn't impressed with TechFlow's choice of leadership. "I've been selling software solutions since you were in middle school," he told her during their first one-on-one meeting. "I'm curious to see what fresh insights you'll bring to an industry I've been working in for 2 decades. The sarcasm was barely concealed. But Trista had expected this kind of resistance. She'd spent her final weeks in Michigan studying leadership techniques specifically designed for young managers overseeing older employees. "I'm not here to teach you how to sell, David," she replied calmly. "You clearly know how to do that. I'm here to help you sell more effectively by providing better tools, stronger client intelligence, and clearer strategic direction. What would make your job easier?" The question caught him off guard. Instead of defending her authority, she'd asked for his expertise. Over the following weeks, David became one of her most valuable allies as she learned the intricacies of the Ohio market. Her second test came in the form of her first major client presentation. Midwest Manufacturing Solutions was a family-owned company that had been operating the same way for 40 years. The owner, Robert Fisher, was a gruff 60-year-old who'd built his business through handshake deals and personal relationships. He had agreed to meet with TechFlow only because his son-in-law had insisted they needed to modernize their inventory management system. Trista walked into the conference room at Midwest Manufacturing wearing her best navy suit and carrying a presentation she'd rehearsed dozens of times. Robert Fisher took one look at her and frowned. "Where's the account manager?" he asked David, who'd accompanied her to the meeting. "I'm the regional manager, Trista McDaniels. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." Fisher reluctantly shook his hand. "How old are you?" "Old enough to understand your business challenges and young enough to think creatively about solutions," she replied smoothly. The presentation should have been straightforward. Trista had identified exactly how TechFlow software could streamline Midwest Manufacturing's operations, reduce overhead costs, and improve customer response times. Her slides were clear, her data was compelling, and her recommendations were precisely tailored to their needs. But halfway through her presentation, Fisher interrupted. "Sweetheart, this all sounds very impressive, but I need to know who's really going to be handling our account. I mean, if we sign with you people, who's the senior person I'll be working with?" The dismissal was so casual, so automatic that it took Trista a moment to process. He wasn't questioning her competence based on her presentation. He was questioning her competence based on her age and gender. "You'll be working with me," she said firmly, "and with the account team I assigned to your project, but I'll be your primary point of contact for strategic decisions and implementation oversight." Fisher exchanged a look with his son-in-law that spoke volumes. "I think we'd be more comfortable working with someone who has a bit more seasoning." That night, Trista called Marcus from her apartment, feeling defeated.
She told him he didn't even listen to the presentation. I could have proposed the perfect solution to world hunger, and he still would have asked to speak to the adult in charge.
Welcome to being a young woman in leadership, Marcus said gently. I'm sorry you had to experience that, but unfortunately it won't be the last time. How do you handle it when clients don't take you seriously? I don't have to handle it the same way you do. When clients question my authority, it's usually about my ideas, not my demographics. But I've watched Patricia deal with this for years, and her approach might help you. Marcus told her about a strategy Patricia had developed early in her career. Instead of fighting to be taken seriously, she'd learned to let her results speak so loudly that skeptics had no choice but to listen. Patricia calls it earning your seat at the table every single day. It's exhausting and it's unfair, but it works. 2 weeks later, Trista got her chance to test this approach when she received an unexpected call from Fisher's son-in-law, Mark Thompson. Ms. McDaniels, I wanted to apologize for how that meeting went. My father-in-law is old-fashioned, but I've been researching your recommendations and they're exactly what we need. Would you be willing to meet with just me to discuss implementation? It turned out that Mark had been quietly advocating for modernization for months, but Fisher had resisted every suggestion. After their meeting with Trista, Mark had done his own analysis and realized her proposed system would save them nearly $200,000 annually in operational costs. Here's the thing, Mark explained over coffee at a downtown cafe. Bob's not a bad guy, but he's from a generation that measures credibility by gray hair and golf club memberships. If you can show him concrete results, he'll come around. Trista proposed a pilot program, a limited implementation of TechFlow's inventory management system in just one of Midwest Manufacturing's 3 facilities. She offered to do the initial setup at cost, with payment tied directly to measurable improvements in efficiency. If we don't deliver at least a 15% improvement in processing time within 60 days, you pay nothing. If we exceed your expectations, we discuss expanding to your other facilities. It was a risky proposition that required approval from Patricia, but it demonstrated something crucial. Trista was willing to bet her reputation on her ability to deliver results. The pilot program became a masterclass in proving herself through performance. Trista spent 3 weeks on-site at Midwest Manufacturing, working alongside their warehouse staff to customize the software implementation. She arrived at 6 a.m. when the first shift started and stayed until the last shipment went out at 8 p.m. The warehouse workers, initially skeptical of the young woman in business attire trying to tell them how to do their jobs, gradually warmed to her when they realized she was genuinely interested in making their work easier, not just implementing technology for its own sake. "You know what I like about you?" said Maria Santos, a 20-year veteran of the warehouse floor. "You actually listen when we tell you something doesn't work. Most consultants come in here acting like they know everything, but you ask questions." By the end of the pilot period, Midwest Manufacturing's processing time had improved by 28%, their error rate had dropped by 40%, and their customer satisfaction scores had reached an all-time high. Robert Fisher called Trista into his office on the last day of the pilot. "I owe you an apology," he said gruffly. "I made assumptions about you that were unfair and wrong. Would you be willing to discuss expanding this system to our other facilities?" That contract became Trista's first major victory in Ohio, a 3-year deal worth $480,000 that exceeded her quarterly targets and proved that her unconventional approach could deliver results. But success came with its own complications. When she called her parents to share the news, their reaction was mixed. "That's wonderful, honey, but are you sure you're not working too hard? Spending that much time at client sites, working such long hours? People might get the wrong idea." Even triumph couldn't escape the shadow of suspicion that followed her everywhere. Her family's assumption that her success must somehow be inappropriate had become a constant background noise that she was learning to ignore, but it still stung. As summer turned to fall, Trista began to understand that proving herself wasn't a one-time event.
It was a daily choice to exceed expectations, deliver exceptional results, and let her work speak louder than the whispers that seemed to follow successful young women everywhere. The tests were getting harder, but so was she.
November brought the kind of cold that cuts through even the thickest coat, and with it came news that would test everything Trista had built in Ohio. She was reviewing quarterly reports in her office when Patricia's call came through, and the tone in her CEO's voice immediately put her on high alert. "Trista, we need to talk. Can you be in Grand Rapids tomorrow morning? There's been a development." The development, it turned out, was a corporate nightmare disguised as a competitor's press release. TechFlow Solutions, TechFlow's biggest rival in the Midwest, had just announced they were launching an aggressive expansion into Ohio, backed by a $50 million investment from a Silicon Valley venture capital firm. The press release specifically mentioned their intention to bring mature, experienced leadership to a market that has been underserved by inexperienced players. The dig was obvious and personal. Everyone in the industry knew that TechFlow's Ohio expansion was being led by their youngest regional manager. "They're not just coming after our market share," Patricia explained during their emergency meeting. "They're coming after your credibility specifically. Their new Ohio director is James Morrison, 45 years old, MBA from Wharton, 20 years of experience with Fortune 500 clients." Trista felt her stomach drop. James Morrison was a legend in enterprise software sales, known for his ability to secure multi-million-dollar contracts and his extensive network of corporate connections. Having him as direct competition was like bringing a knife to a gunfight. "There's more," Patricia continued. "They've already started reaching out to our potential clients. Morrison personally called 3 companies you've been courting, including Buckeye Industrial." Buckeye Industrial was supposed to be Trista's big win for the fourth quarter, a massive manufacturing company that would triple her annual revenue if she could close the deal. She'd been working on their proposal for 3 months, building relationships with their IT director and operations manager, customizing a comprehensive solution for their complex needs. "What did they tell Buckeye?" Trista asked, though she already suspected the answer. Morrison positioned himself as the seasoned alternative to TechFlow's experimental approach. He suggested that a company of Buckeye's size needed proven leadership, not someone learning on the job. The words hit like physical blows. After 5 months of exceeding every target, delivering exceptional results, and building genuine client relationships, Trista was still being reduced to her age and gender by competitors who saw her success as a vulnerability to exploit. "What's our response strategy?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying Trista with the intensity that had made her one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Michigan. "That depends on you. I can reassign the Ohio territory to someone older, more conventional, cut our losses, and move you into a senior analyst role where your age won't be constantly questioned." The offer was delivered kindly, but it felt like a trap door opening beneath Trista's feet. Everything she'd worked for, every client relationship she'd built, every small victory that had slowly constructed her professional credibility, all of it could disappear with one strategic retreat. "Or," she asked, "or you fight. You prove that results matter more than resumes, that innovation trumps experience, and that TechFlow made the right choice when they bet on talent over tenure. What does fighting look like?" Buckeye Industrial is hosting a technology showcase next week. They've invited both TechFlow and Syntech to present comprehensive solutions. Winner takes all. 3-year contract worth $1.2 million. Morrison will present first, and you'll present second. Trista felt her pulse quicken. That's not exactly a level playing field. No, it's not.
Morrison has 20 years of experience, an Ivy League education, and a client network that includes half the Fortune 500. You have 5 months in Ohio, a state school degree, and a team that most people think is too young to handle serious business. The brutal assessment should have been discouraging, but something about Patricia's delivery suggested this was a test, not an execution. But, Patricia continued, Morrison also has something you don't have: overconfidence. He's been winning deals the same way for 2 decades. He'll present a polished, professional solution that looks exactly like every other enterprise software implementation Buckeye has seen. And what will I present?
That's entirely up to you. But remember, you didn't get this position by playing it safe or following conventional wisdom. The drive back to Columbus gave Trista 4 hours to process the magnitude of what she was facing. This wasn't just about winning a client or proving her competence anymore. This was about whether young women could successfully challenge established power structures in corporate America, or whether they would always be seen as temporary disruptions to be managed and contained. She spent the weekend locked in her apartment, developing a presentation that would either validate everything she believed about her own capabilities or confirm every skeptic's worst assumptions about inexperienced leadership. Monday morning brought devastating news that made her challenge even more impossible. Ashley Chen knocked on her office door at 8 a.m. with tears in her eyes. "Trista, I need to tell you something. David's leaving." David Kowalski, her most experienced sales professional and the team member whose initial skepticism had transformed into genuine respect, had accepted a position with TechFlow Solutions. The betrayal felt personal and professional simultaneously. Morrison offered him a 20% salary increase and a senior sales director title, Ashley explained. David said he's sorry, but he needs to think about his family's financial security. By noon, 2 more team members had given notice. Morrison wasn't just competing for clients, he was systematically dismantling Trista's team by offering her best people better positions with more established leadership. That afternoon, Trista sat in her office staring at the Buckeye Industrial proposal she'd been perfecting for months. With half her team gone and her remaining staff demoralized, the presentation felt like an exercise in futility. Morrison had decades of experience, a proven track record, and now he had her best salespeople. What could she possibly offer that would convince Buckeye to choose the unknown over the established? Her phone rang. Emma's name appeared on the caller ID. "Hey, sis! Mom told me about your work situation. She heard from someone that your competitor is stealing your employees?" Trista was too exhausted to be surprised that family gossip had reached Cedar Falls. "News travels fast." "Are you okay? This sounds really stressful." "I'm fine, just dealing with some challenges." "Trista," Emma's voice softened, "I know we haven't been supportive about your career, but I wanted you to know that I've been watching what you've accomplished, and I'm proud of you." The unexpected kindness from her sister nearly broke Trista's carefully maintained composure. "Even if I fail spectacularly next week?" "Especially if you fail spectacularly next week, because at least you'll fail trying to do something extraordinary instead of succeeding at something ordinary." After hanging up, Trista realized that Emma had accidentally identified the key to her presentation strategy. Morrison would offer Buckeye something proven and safe, a conventional solution implemented by conventional methods with conventional results. But conventional wasn't what companies needed in a rapidly changing marketplace. She spent the next 3 days rebuilding her presentation from the ground up, focusing not on matching Morrison's experience, but on offering something he couldn't, a completely different approach to enterprise software implementation that prioritized agility, customization, and ongoing innovation over stability and tradition. The night before the Buckeye presentation, Trista called her remaining team members into the office for a final preparation session. The conference room felt empty with only 8 people instead of 12, but the energy was different, more focused, more determined. "I'm not going to lie to you. Tomorrow is going to be the hardest presentation any of us has ever given. We're competing against someone with 20 years of experience and a track record that speaks for itself.
But here's what James Morrison doesn't have. He doesn't have our hunger, our willingness to innovate, or our commitment to treating clients as partners instead of transactions. Ashley raised her hand. What if we lose? Trista looked around the room at the young professionals who'd chosen to stay, who'd bet their careers on her leadership despite having every reason to follow David to the safety of established success. If we lose fighting for something we believe in. And that's better than winning by playing someone else's game. As her team filed out to prepare for the morning that would determine all their futures, Trista sat alone in the conference room, staring at the presentation that would either validate her unconventional path or end it completely. The crisis point had arrived, and there was nowhere left to hide.
The Buckeye Industrial Headquarters resembled a fortress of corporate tradition. 40-year-old brick buildings surrounded by perfectly manicured lawns and parking lots filled with luxury sedans. Trista arrived at 7:30 a.m. for the 9 o'clock presentation, needing time to set up equipment and calm her nerves. Her team of 8 had arrived even earlier, transforming Buckeye's main conference room into a demonstration space that looked nothing like the typical PowerPoint presentations corporate executives were accustomed to. James Morrison's team had presented first at 8 a.m., and Trista could see the satisfied expressions on Buckeye's leadership team as they filed out for their coffee break. Morrison himself looked relaxed and confident, shaking hands with CEO William Buckeye and making casual conversation about golf courses and mutual connections in the industry. "Tough act to follow," Morrison said to Trista as their teams passed in the hallway, "but I'm sure you'll do your best." The condescension was delivered with a smile, but the message was clear. The real competition was over, and she was just going through the motions. Trista's presentation began differently than anyone expected. Instead of standing behind a podium with slides, she had arranged the conference room like a working factory floor, with laptops positioned at different stations representing various aspects of Buckeye's manufacturing process. "Mr. Buckeye, Ms. Patterson, members of the board, I want to start by acknowledging something my competitor probably told you. I'm 25 years old, I've been in Ohio for 6 months, and I have a fraction of his experience. Everything he said is absolutely true." The admission created visible confusion among the Buckeye executives. Standard sales protocol was to emphasize strengths, not highlight weaknesses. But here's what Mr. Morrison can't tell you, because he spent 20 years learning to do things the established way. He can't tell you how to revolutionize your operations, because revolution isn't in his vocabulary. It's in his business to maintain the status quo that has made him successful. She gestured to Ashley, who powered up the first laptop station. "What I'm going to show you today isn't a software implementation. It's a complete reimagining of how manufacturing companies can operate in an economy that changes by the month, not by the decade." The first station demonstrated real-time inventory management that went far beyond traditional tracking systems. Instead of simply monitoring stock levels, Trista's proposed system used predictive analytics to anticipate demand fluctuations, automatically adjust orders based on seasonal patterns, and identify potential supply chain disruptions before they impacted production. "Your current system tells you what happened yesterday," she explained as the demo showed live data flowing between interconnected displays. "This system tells you what's going to happen next week, next month, and next quarter." William Buckeye leaned forward, genuinely intrigued. How accurate are these predictions? "In our pilot program with Midwest Manufacturing, we achieved 87% accuracy in demand forecasting and prevented 4 potential stockouts that would have cost them approximately $60,000 in lost production time." The second station showcased customer relationship integration that turned routine transactions into strategic intelligence. The system captured not just what clients ordered, but when they ordered it, how their needs evolved over time, and what market conditions influenced their purchasing decisions. This isn't just software. This is a competitive intelligence platform that helps you anticipate your customers' needs before they know they have them. Margaret Patterson, Buckeye's operations director, asked the question Trista had been hoping for. How does this differ from what Syntec proposed?
Syntech offered you a very sophisticated system for doing exactly what you're doing now, just more efficiently. They're selling you a faster horse when what you need is a car. Trista moved to the third station, where her team had created a live simulation of Buckeye's current production challenges. The screen showed bottlenecks in real time, highlighted inefficiencies that traditional systems missed, and demonstrated how dynamic scheduling could increase throughput by 32% without adding new equipment or personnel. Mr. Morrison showed you impressive case studies from companies that have been using established systems for years. But those companies are competing against yesterday's problems. Your competition isn't using yesterday's solutions, they're developing tomorrow's advantages. The room's energy had shifted. Instead of politely tolerating a presentation they'd already mentally dismissed, the Buckeye executives were asking technical questions, requesting clarification on implementation timelines, and discussing how the proposed changes would impact their existing operations. But Trista's breakthrough moment came when she addressed the elephant in the room.
"I know what you're thinking," she said, facing William Buckeye squarely. "You're wondering whether someone my age can really deliver on these promises, whether you should trust your company's future to someone who looks like she should be asking for career advice, not giving it." The honesty was startling. No sales professional had ever acknowledged their perceived weaknesses so directly in a high-stakes presentation. Here's what I learned in my first 6 months in Ohio. Age and experience aren't the same thing. Mr. Morrison has 20 years of experience implementing systems that worked perfectly for the business environment of 2005. I have 6 months of experience solving problems that didn't exist until 2025. She clicked to her final slide, which showed a side-by-side comparison of traditional implementation approaches versus her proposed methodology. Syntech will give you a 12-month implementation timeline because that's how long it takes to install complex enterprise software using conventional methods. We'll have your core systems running in 6 weeks because we're not trying to replicate what worked for other companies. We're building something specifically for your challenges. Margaret Patterson looked skeptical. 6 weeks seems unrealistic for a system this comprehensive. It would be unrealistic if we were starting from scratch. But we're not. Every solution I've shown you today has been tested and refined through implementations at 3 other Ohio companies. We're not selling you experimental technology, we're offering you proven innovation. Ashley stepped forward with a tablet showing real-time data from Midwest Manufacturing's system. This is live footage from their production floor right now. You can see exactly how our solutions perform under actual operating conditions. The demonstration was powerful, but Trista's final argument was the one that secured the contract. Mr. Morrison offers you safety, a known quantity with predictable results. Choose Syntech, and in 3 years, you'll have a very sophisticated system for running your business exactly the way you run it today. Choose TechFlow, and in 3 years, you'll be running a business your competitors can't figure out how to match. She paused, looking around the room at executives who'd built their careers on careful, conservative decisions. The question isn't whether I'm qualified to implement your software. The question is whether you're ready to stop competing against the past and start winning in the future. The presentation ended with something unprecedented, spontaneous applause from a corporate boardroom. William Buckeye stood up and shook Trista's hand with genuine enthusiasm. "Miss McDaniels, I'll be honest. When this meeting started, I was prepared to sign with Syntech. Your competitor has an impressive track record and a very polished presentation. But what you've shown us today isn't just software implementation, it's business transformation." Margaret Patterson nodded in agreement. The question is implementation support. Can your team really deliver on these promises? Trista gestured to her 8 remaining team members who'd spent the entire presentation working seamlessly together to demonstrate complex technical concepts. 6 months ago, most of these people had never worked together. Today, they're the most cohesive technical team I've ever seen. We don't have 20 years of experience doing things the old way. We have 6 months of experience doing things the right way.
3 hours later, Trista was sitting in her car in Buckeye's parking lot staring at a signed contract worth $1.2 million and a 3-year partnership that would establish TechFlow as a major player in Ohio's enterprise software market. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Heard the news! Congratulations! This changes everything!" But as Trista drove back to Columbus, she realized the breakthrough wasn't just about winning one contract or proving her competence to one client. She discovered something fundamental about leadership that no business school could ever teach. Sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage you could have, because it freed you to innovate while your competition was busy maintaining their reputation. For the first time since accepting the promotion, she wasn't fogging to prove she belonged. She was leading from a position of strength, and everyone else was trying to catch up.
Thanksgiving 2025 felt like stepping into a parallel universe version of the McDaniels family gathering. The same relatives filled the same dining room, but the conversations swirling around Trista were fundamentally different from the whispered suspicions that had poisoned previous holidays. This time, the talk centered on her recent feature in Midwest Business Weekly as one of Ohio's rising stars under 30, and the industry recognition TechFlow's Ohio expansion had garnered in the 6 months since the Buckeye Industrial contract. "So explain to me again how this software thing works," her Uncle Robert said, leaning forward with genuine curiosity instead of his previous skepticism. "The article said you're helping companies predict what their customers want before they order it?" Trista found herself in the strange position of downplaying her success rather than defending it. The Buckeye contract had triggered a chain reaction of opportunities that even she hadn't anticipated. 3 Fortune 500 companies had reached out after reading about TechFlow's innovative approach. 2 competitors had tried to poach her with offers that doubled her current salary, and Patricia had just approved her proposal to expand into Kentucky and Tennessee. "It's predictive analytics combined with real-time inventory management," she explained, watching her grandmother Dolores actually take notes on a napkin. "We help companies understand patterns in their business they might not notice otherwise." What struck her most was how the family's narrative about her success had completely transformed. The same relatives who'd whispered about inappropriate relationships now spoke proudly about their niece who was revolutionizing how businesses operate. The same achievements that had been dismissed as suspicious were now celebrated as evidence of McDaniel's family intelligence and work ethic. Her cousin Jake, who'd been among the most vocal skeptics the previous year, pulled her aside after dinner. "I owe you an apology," he said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "Last year, when you got that promotion, I said some things. I thought some things that weren't fair. I was jealous, honestly. Here you were, younger than me, making more money than anyone in our family, and it seemed too easy. What changed your mind? I started reading about what you actually do, and I realized I was being an ass because I couldn't understand how someone could succeed that fast without cheating somehow. But you weren't cheating, you were just playing a game the rest of us didn't even know existed." The conversation with Jake encapsulated something Trista had been processing for months. Her family's suspicions hadn't really been about her integrity or competence. They'd been about their own limitations and fear of a world that was changing faster than they could comprehend. Emma found her later, sitting on the back porch where they'd spent countless summer evenings as children. "You know what's funny?" Emma said, settling into the old swing their father had built 20 years ago. "I used to think you were trying to be better than us. But now I realize you were just trying to be yourself in a family that didn't know how to handle someone like you. I never wanted to be different from everyone. I know, but you were different, and instead of celebrating that, we tried to make you smaller so we'd feel more comfortable." Emma paused, staring out at the backyard where they'd played as kids. "I've been thinking about going back to school, maybe getting a degree in business administration. Your success made me realize I've been settling for less than I'm capable of." The ripple effects of Trista's achievements were extending beyond professional recognition into family dynamics she'd never expected to influence. Her younger sister was considering college for the first time in years. Her cousin Sarah had started taking online marketing courses, and even her father had begun asking questions about entrepreneurship. "The weirdest part," Emma continued, "is that everyone at the diner where I work knows about you now. They're always asking me what it's like having a sister who's some kind of business genius. And you know what I tell them? I tell them you were always this smart. We just didn't know how to see it." 3 days after Thanksgiving, Trista was back in Columbus preparing for the quarterly board meeting that would determine TechFlow's expansion strategy for 2026. The conference room on the 15th floor felt familiar now, a far cry from the intimidating executive suite that had once made her nervous.
Patricia opened the meeting by reviewing Ohio's performance metrics. In 8 months, our Ohio region has exceeded revenue projections by 43%, secured 4 major enterprise contracts, and established TechFlow as a legitimate competitor to companies with decades more experience. More importantly, we've developed implementation methodologies that are now being adopted by our other regions.
The numbers were impressive, but what surprised Trista was the broader impact her success had generated within TechFlow itself. Marcus had been promoted to Vice President of Innovation, tasked with scaling the approaches she'd pioneered in Ohio. 2 other regional managers had requested transfers to learn her techniques firsthand. The company's recruitment efforts now emphasized adaptability and creative problem-solving over traditional experience metrics. Which brings us to our next phase, Patricia continued, turning to Trista. I'm recommending that the board approve your proposal for Southeastern expansion, but with a modification. Instead of managing Kentucky and Tennessee as additional territories, I want you to oversee the development of our new innovation division. The promotion came with a title that made Trista's head spin. Vice President of Strategic Innovation, responsible for developing cutting-edge solutions and training other regional managers in advanced implementation techniques. At 26, she would be the youngest VP in TechFlow's history and one of the youngest executives in the enterprise software industry. The position comes with equity participation and a compensation package that reflects the value you've created for this company, Patricia explained. But more importantly, it positions you to shape how our entire industry approaches client relations and technological implementation. That evening, Trista called her parents from her apartment in Columbus, looking out at a city skyline that had become home in ways Cedar Falls never quite had. Mom, Dad, I have some news. She explained the promotion, the equity package, and the recognition that came with being asked to lead TechFlow's most innovative division. Her parents' response was everything she'd hoped for during those difficult months when their support had been conditional and hesitant. Honey, we are so proud of you, her mother said, and for the first time in years, the pride felt uncomplicated. Your father and I were talking last week about how wrong we were to doubt you. We didn't understand what you were building, and we let our fear make us small. We should have trusted you from the beginning, your father added. You've always been the smartest person in this family. We just didn't know how to handle having a daughter who was destined for things bigger than anything we'd ever imagined. The conversation that had once felt impossible, her parents acknowledging their mistakes and celebrating her success without reservation, was happening naturally, without the defensiveness or justification that had characterized their previous discussions about her career. But, perhaps, the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. James Morrison, the Syntech executive who'd tried to undermine her credibility, reached out through LinkedIn with a message that validated everything she'd fought to prove. Ms. McDaniels, I wanted to congratulate you on the Midwest Business Weekly feature and your promotion to VP. When we competed for the Buckeye contract, I underestimated both your capabilities and your approach to client relations. Your success has forced our entire company to reconsider how we think about innovation and customer service. I hope we have the opportunity to collaborate rather than compete in the future. The message represented something profound, acknowledgement from the established industry that her methods weren't just different, they were better. As 2026 began, Trista found herself in a position she'd never quite imagined when she'd accepted that first promotion 18 months ago. She wasn't just succeeding despite being young and unconventional, she was succeeding because she was young and unconventional. Her age had become an asset rather than a liability. Her fresh perspective was valued over traditional experience metrics, and her willingness to innovate was exactly what companies needed in a rapidly changing marketplace. The whispers about how she really earned her success had been replaced by requests for mentorship from other young professionals who saw her as proof that merit could triumph over skepticism. The family members who had once questioned her integrity now asked for career advice.
The industry that had initially dismissed her was now studying her methods. Standing in her corner office on the 20th floor of TechFlow's new Columbus headquarters, looking out at a city where she'd built something meaningful from nothing, Trista realized that the greatest victory wasn't proving her doubters wrong. It was creating a new reality where being underestimated became the foundation for extraordinary achievement. The young woman who'd once felt like she had to apologize for her success was now teaching others how to embrace their own potential, regardless of what anyone else thought they deserved.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.